Hey folks, Jeff Salzman here, and welcome to the Daily Evolver. One of the great pleasures for me of doing this show is that I get to talk to and highlight to the integral community at large some of the people who are using integral theory in the most interesting and effective ways. And that's especially cool for, I think, a guy like me who I really just like to think about it, but to talk to people who are applying it, who are using it in some form of integral functioning is really thrilling to me. And my guest today is an exemplar of this. And in a way, a most unexpected field, but a very fertile one. And that is the field of sports and athletic performance. And my guest is Scott Ford. And Scott Ford, who I'll introduce in a second, I'm just going to give a little bit of background. Scott is the author of the book, Integral Consciousness and Sport, Unifying Body, Mind, and Spirit Through Flow. He is also founding member of the Sports, Energy, and Consciousness Group, which is a collective of doctors and psychologists, scientists, athletes, coaches, and a growing group of people. They're having their third conference coming up here in July in San Rafael. And a great group. And I'll read just a line from their mission statement, because I think this sort of helps orient Scott and what we'll be talking about. They write, "Our mission is to accelerate the global evolution of human consciousness," right up my alley, "by providing transformational practices that translate the wisdom of sports, quote, ideal performance state." And I love that, the ideal performance state, which they initial cap each word. So it translates the wisdom of sports' ideal performance state into practical training methods that include energetics, awakened states of consciousness, and the unification of body, mind, and spirit. To which I say hallelujah and welcome Scott Ford to the Daily Evolver.
Thank you, Jeff, very much. It's very nice to be here, and hello to your audience. Thank you for inviting me to be on your show.
My great pleasure and privilege. What I love about your work and your book is that you are using an explicit integral framework. You're using Ken Wilber's Aqua Map to chart development of athletic performance. And right up past excellence into flow states, transpersonal states. And I want to get to all of that because, it's applicable to life in general.
Yes.
But first, I thought I might ask you to just fill our listeners in on your background and your journey to where you are, which is, I believe, started quite early at age 11, right?
Yeah, I started playing tennis when I was 11, and fortunately I had two older brothers who sort of waxed me daily until I got better. And so I had some really good practice partners, and I ended up winning the Colorado State Championships as a 12 and under player. And one of the things that I always wanted to do was be around my brothers while they were teaching in this Aurora Park and Rec department. So I would go hang out with them and shag balls and everything, and they'd teach lessons to all the people. And one week we had 4 little kids who were just bothering everybody. And the guy who was running the program said, "Scott, here's a bucket of balls and some rackets. Go down there and keep those 4 little kids out of our hair." So basically, I went down there with these little kids and showed them all of the stuff that I'd been learning in the tennis tournaments I was playing in, because I'd always asked whoever was the main tennis pro at the club if I could watch them teach. And they'd go, "Sure, kid, just sit over here. Don't cause any trouble. Just, you can watch." And so I learned by watching other tennis pros kind of how to play tennis myself. and all of the techniques and teaching techniques that they use for groups. And So I ended up lining up these 4 little kids down on the end court and had them practice.
And you're 12.
I'm 12. They're 8, 9. And pretty soon the coach comes down and goes, Scott, where'd you learn to do this? And I was doing better stuff than they were doing, basically. And I said, this is kind of where I learned. And he said, you want a job? And I went, well, yeah. So here I was at 12 years old, and I had my first tennis teaching job in this little teeny park and rec program in Aurora. And basically my life has been sort of surrounded by tennis, either as a player or as a teacher. And I have been teaching it every year of my life ever since.
Wow.
I'm 70 this year, so that's
that's a lot of years. I would say you have achieved mastery.
I will agree there, although, that's a flexible term. I keep working on it,
Well, and that's what I want to look at is, that you're actually not only achieving mastery in terms of how we would think about tennis being played, but you're moving the ball, if you're, pardon the expression, into new territory. And why don't we just get right into that? And I'm going to put up a chart that you put together called the Stages of Coaching and Competitive Development that is aligned with integral theory. I know a lot of you are listening on a podcast and you won't see this, but it's on the site, and we'll keep it simple. It is pretty simple. So here I'm going to put it on a share screen here. And basically, if I could just put the lay of the land here, you're talking about basically 2 tiers of athletic development. The first tier you've divided into 3 stages, stage 1, 2, and 3. And then there's a shift into integral, which you consider to be 4, and then unitive, stage 5.
Right.
So with that in mind, let's just look at the development of athletic development here.
I can use myself as an example here, because down in stage 1, that was me at like age 12. I was sort of learning the fundamentals of the game, and I was teaching them. That's exactly what I was doing while I was playing as a competitor in the local tournaments.
And what you have here is, this is the first stage where you're learning the foundational techniques and the rules and the tools and just, getting your arms around it.
Exactly. And that's all that happens really early on with any kind of coaching in any kind of sport. When we start people off, it's basically, okay, here's the rules and tools, and here's some basic fundamentals. And then we kind of toss them out.
I'd like to say, just incidentally, that I think that's as far as I ever got in any sport, but I'm actually not sure I even got that far. Sort of applying it to myself here. All right. So anyway, we're moving to stage 2, which is recreational winning, achievement, strategy, tactics, strength training, and more complex techniques.
Yeah, and if you just think of the growing up process, this is where everything gets a lot more complexity added to the entire game. It just becomes more complex, it becomes faster, the competition becomes tougher, and the prizes become greater. And you go into, it really becomes this almost kill or be killed type of competitive arena, at least when I grew up. And this is probably where most of the coaching in the world takes place.
This would be what, high school, right?
Yeah, it would be high school, or it would be adult medium level recreational play, or even high level recreational play, state tournaments. This could go actually up to almost college. And then college, you start getting up into more of the elite level. That's the green, that's the post-conventional level, stage 3, where we've got a lot of excellent mental training starts to come in here. Whereas in the conventional stage. It's mostly physical training and some strategies and stuff, but it's
skills and all that good stuff.
mostly based about skills. And then as we get into the elite level, it gets into more of the mind game. And here you're competing. And if you have some mental skills on top of your physical skills, then this mind-body unit you're using is going to play better.
Right.
There's really a level where the coaching at this level of development really starts talking about self-excellence. And that on the developmental pathways, this is where the cleaning up pathway really starts to take place, because higher level athletes, especially college, Olympic level athletes, even professional athletes, they really have to have their act together mentally when they go out and play, and they're playing day in and day out and day in and day out. And it gets really difficult if you don't have some sort of mindfulness or some sort of practice where you're practicing competitive concentration.
Mm-hmm.
So
and this is really, this is the elite level, even today. I mean, this would be a lot of professionals at this level. And this is still just level 3.
Right.
But this is that, we got the mind body together.
Yep.
We're working on our mental stuff, visualization, a lot of stuff that we think of as cutting edge coaching.
Well, a lot of this started, Jeff, back in the human potential movement, back in, the late 50s, early 60s, out in California, in the San Francisco Bay Area, with the human potential movement. And Esalen was a big part of this. And it really was where the first display of any kind of visualization / training started to happen. And some of the guys in our sport, energy, and conscience group were the actual first founders of the Esalen Sports Center. And they used a lot of these techniques. A tennis pro by the name of Timothy Gallway, who wrote a very famous book in the tennis circles called The Inner Game of Tennis.
I remember that book.
Yeah,
that was
came
a big
out
book.
in 1974. And that basically blew the socks off of traditional tennis teaching, which was heavily into biomechanics and the kinetic chain and yada, yada. And it was somebody like this Timothy Galway came along, and he brought some Zen philosophy into coaching.
Right.
And it was fascinating to watch. But all of us certified biomechanics pros, myself included, thought that he was sort of a joke, because
Really?
yes. It was there was this almost this, you talk about an anti-teaching establishment. That was us. We did it our way, and that we were real proud of how much we knew about just the mechanics.
All you stage 2 people.
Yeah, we were heavily into that, and even into stage 3, where we were elite coaches. All they are is the elite biomechanics coaches, really, that have taken it even farther and have started to include, but this is where the mind game started to be included in coaching. So
well, clearly they won you over at some point.
Yeah, it did, and I'll get into that in a minute. Yeah. Right. A few years later, it won me over big, but that was sort of and it still is, the top of the heap in coaching.
Well, Scott, is this where, so we hear about like Phil Griffin, we hear about the Mariners meditating. Is this what we're talking about with
it's just started.
Cutting edge of?
Yeah, they're really kind of at the leading edge of what's going on in professional coaching now. They went from just having sports psychologists come in to having mindfulness coaches. They're doing a lot of yoga practices. They're doing a lot of meditation practices now. They don't like to admit it, but they are.
Yeah. Well, this is also true of coaches in business and, the sort of other category of coaches.
Exactly.
They're using a lot of meditative and, mindfulness as a means of excellence, as a means of self-mastery.
Yes. And the key word there is self-excellence. Mm-hmm. This is really why college coaches, especially, and Olympic level coaches are going, what we are trying to get across to you is to bring out your own self-excellence. And in so doing, you will perform at your highest level, and you'll win more gold medals, and I'll be considered a really high level coach.
Well, that's a beautiful thing.
It is,
but it's
absolutely.
not the end.
No, and it is, however, almost like a glass ceiling that hits coaches, where the next thing that has to happen in those developmental pathways is this waking up to higher stages of competitive consciousness. And that would be this flow state, this flow consciousness. And when we see that coming into play, that's where the stage 3 coaches are, they don't like us at all, because
Really?
we're going beyond, well, they're starting to.
Well,
like,
they understand flow, though, right? I mean,
well,
or
yeah,
not.
they
I mean, actually, before we talk too much about flow, let's define it ourselves here. Do you want to take a shot at it?
I'll absolutely take a shot at it, and I'll tell you exactly how it happened with me. In 1978, I was literally getting ready to quit coaching because I was so tired of teaching people how to move their feet and take their backswing and do all of the biomechanics stuff, and then sending them out and then watching them. Sometimes they play well, sometimes they wouldn't. But I myself was having trouble with my timing. I was out hitting with a guy. We were preparing for a tournament, and we were just hitting back and forth from mid-court and just sharp volleys back and forth, about 1-2 seconds max in between each hit. And I was hitting everything late. And I was supposed to be a big elite tennis pro, and I'm hitting the ball late and I'm missing shots, and I felt awful. And all of a sudden I just said, this is silly. Let's do something to fix your timing. And for some reason, I decided to pretend like I had a big imaginary invisible shield, like a big window out in front of me, just like right out here, where I would like to make contact with the ball. And I started saying, okay, if I make contact there, my timing will be at least consistent. Let's see what happens. So I started doing this, and I was watching the ball as closely as I could, back and forth. And sure enough, I was still hitting it late. So I said, well, the heck with this. I'm going to just stop doing that. I'm going to just keep my focus on this window and not let anything get past it. And I started doing this hit, and then go, yeah, that was good. No, that was behind. Yes, no, yes, 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 yes. Suddenly, and I mean suddenly, I just got totally entranced in this little childlike game of defending this imaginary window. And I was knocking the crap out of the ball. I was hitting as good a shots as I've ever hit in volleys. And every time I was doing it, I was going, yes, yes, yes. And the guy on the other side of the net goes, Scott, what are you doing? It's like, you got in the zone. What's going on? And I said, that's exactly what's going on. And I could feel it. And frankly, Jeff, I just, all of a sudden I went, oh my God, I found it.
Yeah.
That was my exact words, because I knew this was like the holy grail of sport. It's what everything we ever tried to do. And every once in a while, it would kind of come over us randomly. It would be like, we'd come in and we'd play in the zone for a little while, and then it would leave. You go, what in the hell just happened?
Well, that's what I love about your writing. You talk about flow by choice, not by chance.
Mm-hmm.
And that you have a reliable portal or way into that.
Mm-hmm.
But just from a developmental point of view, or even a consciousness point of view, what's happening is we're having a collapse of subject and object.
Yes.
Correct?
That was exactly what was happening. Although at the time, I was more into, wow, I'm in the zone, I'm playing really, really well. And then my opponent asked me what I was doing. And I showed him, and he kind of chuckled at me, imaginary window, you gotta be kidding. I said, no, try it. So he tried it, and he started going, yes, no. And suddenly he got in the zone as well. And we must have hit 50, 60 balls in a row, and just very good volleys. And we stopped, and I said, were you in the zone? And he said, yeah. And he said, this is cool. And I said, he happened to be a clinical psychologist. And I said, what's going on? You're the psychologist. And he actually said, we don't know. We know about this being in the zone. And it was just at the time starting to be called flow.
Right.
This guy named Mihai Csikszentmihalyi from University of Chicago put out a book called Flow. And it
Another
came out.
big book.
Yeah, many. And he had started defining all of these different characteristics of flow. And I was having all of them, including this different state of consciousness that had come over me. And I mean, that subject object collapse, as you call it, was happening to me, but I was like, had no clue about any of this stuff.
Well, it's just so thrilling. It's such, I mean, that happens if you're in gardening, if you're playing an instrument, if you're making love. There's all kinds of ways that it's not you doing it, it's you and it being done. You're one thing, subject and object are one thing, and there's just a natural genius that arises in that state.
I was able to continue doing it using this same little childlike game.
Okay, so describe this game, because this is sort of still key to the insight.
Yes, the difference being I had stopped watching the ball back and forth.
You mean we're not supposed to keep our eye on the ball?
I know, and I was doing that was the way I learned. Everybody learns to, watch the ball, concentrate on the ball. Everything was about subject relative to this fast moving object. So there's this natural duality in every one of our competitive games. And I was doing something exactly the opposite. I was defocusing from the ball and focusing right here on my hitting zone. And when I show this to people while we're not doing anything, I just have them put their finger out in front of them and look at your fingernail, and you can still see everything in the background on the other side of your fingernail peripherally. And then what I was doing is I was putting my finger down and keeping my eyes focused on this imaginary window. And really what it kind of translates to is soft focus, but I was actually fixing my focus on this plane where I was going to make contact. And then the ball would come into focus and go out of focus and come into focus and come out of focus. And as long as I maintained this polar opposite way of using my focus from what I was taught, I stayed in the zone. When I went back to watching the ball, I came out of the zone immediately, boom, just like that. And anytime I would be focused on my contact zone and I'd hit a shot, if I'd watch my shot to see how good it was, then I'd be focused on the ball again. And there was that subject-object duality immediately, just like that, coming back into my game. And although that felt more comfortable to me because that's the way I had been conditioned since I was a little kid, and I was really good at it, I was better at this 2 days after I started it. One day. And it was the same thing that had happened to me when I'd gotten into the zone growing up and playing every once in a while, but I never knew how to reproduce it. And
it's one of the most frustrating things about being a human being is that kids are often in a flow.
Oh yes, little kids are.
I mean, and then we lose that. We think, what happened? What have I done? What went wrong? I don't sparkle anymore. I don't have the joy I used to have.
No.
Welcome to adulthood. But but then we can keep going and actually bring that back online in this new way. And let me just say too, Scott, that what you're doing is spiritual practice. I mean, you're
I know that now.
yes, but what I love about doing it in the context of sport is that sports, you can't fool yourself. You either hit the ball back or you don't, and it's 50 or it's 60 or it's whatever time it is or whatever scores or whatever. I mean, there is something about it that is concrete.
Yes.
That is really, powerful practice territory.
It's very authentic practice. And it is about as authentic as you're going to get when you're out there playing. And the nice thing I couldn't fool myself, and I couldn't say, yeah, this is not really happening.
Right.
and you're just having a good day. I mean, this was a great day, and then the next day was a great day, and I was just kept reproducing this overall feeling. That was sort of the thing that happened. My game went up, and I was playing in a pretty fast league, and so everybody else noticed it as well. So some of my contemporaries, I would show them how to do this, and they said, "Well, that's just silly. You know, that's just something you can do." And here they are doing it and actually getting better. What they didn't understand was that you have to practice this. It would be like the first time you sit down to meditate and you go, "Oh my God, my brain is going all over the place." And then you start getting something kind of quiet going, and you're able to sort of watch your thoughts and do all of the general stuff. That's fine. And then you go, "I'm not very good at it. I could only do this for like 20 seconds or 30 seconds or whatever." And it's like that with this as well. But in the context of a game, the way I teach it to people is we stay up pretty close to each other, and it's all done under, calm, controlled situation where there's not a whole lot of action where they're not used to it. And then we build on that.
Mm-hmm.
You're able to maintain this soft focus in a chaotic surrounding where the norm is to look at all the chaos and try to make sense out of it. And what they're doing is focused on nothing but seeing everything in real time instead of following it all a little bit behind everything.
Mm-hmm.
And it really gives people a different sense of their presence with this environment because they are literally connecting to the flowing present dimension of this environment and staying stably connected to that as long as they do this soft focus thing where they look along the surface of their window for the contact point. They're actually putting themselves into the flowing present dimension. They're co-creating it. And that gets into some kind of weird stuff. But
yeah, I was going to say, damn, man. The
the
flowing present.
Yeah.
Right on.
That's the nunc fluens as compared to the nunc stans, which is the eternal present. So what this is more the relative domains version of presence.
Yeah.
Absolute presence, which
yeah.
is the absolute domain.
Yeah, that's still, but this is the flowing, and but presence nonetheless.
Absolutely.
And did you know that? I mean,
that
were you a spiritual practitioner who sort of found this, or
No, I was a Missouri Synod Lutheran who was scared to hell out of God and everything. It was like I was going to hell. I grew up in a church school, and it was not at all like this. I never had an experience like this in the pews,
Right.
This happened, and it rocked my world. It was one of these Satori kind of experiences of like, I've been looking for this my whole life, and I tripped over it, basically.
Yeah. Now, did you know it once you tripped over it, or did you just run with it as an athletic?
I did it athletically to start with, but then I kept noticing there was this deeper sense of being when I was in this, and I liked that. It was like, this is real. This is like the real me, and this is the real game, and this is my real relationship at a deep, deep level.
And you're having success with students.
Oh, yes.
So yes. This is all,
Mm-hmm. But they had to go through the same thing. That was the part of the training that some of them did not want to do. They didn't want to challenge themselves with this practice wherein they would sort of let go of ego. They were not connected to the outcome like this. You're not connected to the outcome. You're just focused on the process of making contact right at this window. And then you get really good at that, and you start watching your outcome going, look how good I am, and all of a sudden it's gone.
Yeah, I do that on the meditation cushion all the time.
Sure. Nice going.
Oh, I'm doing really great. Oh, shit.
Yeah, exactly. And it's sort of like I started calling those flash outs. And anytime you'd be in this focal state and you'd be going along really well, and then you'd flash out on your shot and miss the next ball. And I'd hit with people and I'd go, what were you looking at? And they go, well, I watched my shot. And I said, yeah, that's a flash out on outcome. And then they go, oh, you're right. So they start being able to differentiate between process and outcome. And, that your basic stage 3 Psych 101 sports psychology guys are all going, stay in the process, stay out of the outcome.
Mm-hmm.
Then, of course, you end up watching the ball back and forth. So you're in the process when it's coming at you. And then when you watch it going away, you're in the outcome. So you're constantly going back and forth from process to outcome, process to outcome. And you never really give yourself a chance to get into a flow state because you're dividing it. All of this dualistic stuff is not what flow is. Flow is very non-dual.
Yeah. Well, I put the chart back up just so we can nail down those stage 4 and stage 5. And this is what you consider the integral level. Stage 4 is self-transformation, conscious flow, energetics, mental state training, and consciousness technology. And the idea is to find your authentic self in this process.
Yeah, and terminology has different terms for this, but stages 1 through 3 are more with egoic self-development, and then you do this. The paradigm shift is the switch out of ego into this authentic self-development.
Right. And then the 5th stage is self-transcendent, which is that sport as spiritual training, and that's sort of the further fruition of this.
Right, and that's where it gets into more of a deeper oneness with everything. And I was feeling that very early on doing this. It started to hit me deep that there's something going on here that has to do with being one with more than just the game of tennis. I was feeling like tennis could then be like one with other games, one with a big, one with the biggest game. And I'm still competing in those games, but I wasn't competing to win a game. I was competing to co-create this different reality that was, for me, what the game was all about and what all of them were about.
Well, so it's so interesting to hear you talk about it in terms of the game. Mm-hmm. And I want to ask you, it relates, the way I relate to it, not being an athlete, is that when I'm having a subject-object collapse, when I'm in some sort of a flow state, I feel like I have access to an intelligence that is beyond me, that I have receptors for, I have antenna for, but it's not coming from me.
Right.
And this is, just intrinsically thrilling, deeply satisfying. And of course, it accesses all the genius that you couldn't pull out of yourself if you tried.
No,
but there it is.
Exactly. And for me, it first showed as a physical genius coming out, my own physical genius on the game of playing. And that's only to your limits. I mean, I'm so good, and that's as good as I'm going to ever get. And then I go up here, and it's like, wait a minute, what's going on? There's something else here. And I was accessing different ways of solving these problems of making positive contact with the ball. And they were way different than I was normally used to. It was like I was creating new stuff for me for making positive contact. And what you're talking about is what happens when you get into this flowing presence in the relative domain. That gives you direct access to eternal presence in the absolute domain. And that's where you're starting to talk about absolute consciousness, pure consciousness in this other domain. How do we get to that other domain? Well, if that domain is right here, right now, all the time, that's the eternal of it. Then if we're in the past or flying out on the future, we're going back and forth in, times opposites. We're not anywhere near time's basic fundamental dimension of flowing presence in the relative domain. which directly connects you to eternal presence in the absolute domain. And all of these things that you're saying that I have access to when I'm in this state, you're exactly right. But you're also participating in those new thoughts that are coming to you. They're coming to you because you're open in a way that they can come to you. At whatever your stage of development, the next good stuff is going to be right there for you. And then it's a matter of absorbing it and sort of putting it into your daily life.
Well, and how fabulous that you're doing this in the realm of athletics, which people are already so interested in. It relates to in terms of an integral practice, the physical dimension, the somatic. It's really, I think, has a lot of potential to really move the ball in human development. And I'm happy to see you not just, thinking about it, writing about it, and teaching about it, but building an organization and actually drawing people to this. And I'm, happy to see your success at that. So tell us a little bit about, what is it, the Sports, Energy,
and Consciousness Group.
And Consciousness Group,
yeah,
yes.
And we, SEC Group, and of course, we're a little bit, we wish we could name ourselves again, because we probably wouldn't use SEC as our acronym, but it is what it is, and it's growing, and there are people out there, and there are coaches and athletes out there at all levels, all ages, who are looking for something more than just, I got to go beat the crap out of the guy across the net, and that's going to make me feel really good. And especially the millennials are really loving this kind of thing. They're in search of some meaning of some sort, and this gives them something that they can firmly grasp onto and say, yes, this is me, but this is me at a developmental increase. I am actually feeling myself getting higher, getting deeper, getting wider, expanding. All of this is happening just through seeing their expansive nature of playing in the zone, whatever game they're playing. I don't care if you're playing checkers. If you get in the zone and play checkers, you're going to be one with the game of checkers. If you're doing any other kind of relational experience and you are in your flow state, hopefully you could show the other people or transmit to them some sort of similar type of state experience, in which case you're both in a flow state simultaneously. Well, if you think about that, that's an entirely different relational environment that is being...
It's in a different quadrant.
Way in a different, it's actually...
It's part of the we space. It's part of second person. It's an irreducible dimension of reality. First person is as well, that, our personal excellence and transcendence and all that. But now you're talking about where both of you are in this.
Yes, and one of the most enjoyable and gratifying experiences I ever have is when I've got like 4 people out on the court and I'm coaching, and all 4 of them are in a flow state, and I'm just kind of cruising around watching, observing all of this, and I'm trying to stay in a flow state. I'm seeing the whole thing, and it's almost like a different language is being spoken. They don't say a word, but there's this understanding about what's going on without them having to do anything. Everybody is just playing at their highest level, but they're also in this oneness state with everybody else.
And they're all being played by the loving intelligence of the cosmos.
Yeah.
Something like that.
What a display.
Again, hallelujah.
Yeah. And so I those are the reasons I teach. And it's interesting because every level of development, if we're talking about these levels, every one of those levels is capable of doing this, because we're all human beings and we're all living in this relative domain of space and time, and we all have the capability of connecting to this flowing present dimension. It's just how do we do it? And normally we just trip over it someday and something happens and it's like, boy, everything is right. This is the way it's supposed to be. And we have this sensation that I'm right. This is right. All of it's right. And then it goes away. And it's like, it's not right. It's what's wrong. And it's important that people can reproduce this and find out ways to reproduce it. And I think that's what's happening in the integral community, is that we're figuring out ways to lay down some sort of structure to this second tier experience where we are actually working together. And it's not like, hey, this is my way of doing it or my way of doing it. We're going, this is our way of getting people into this flow state, or to be able to recreate this other reality, both in we spaces and in, everything I teach is in a we space. I mean, it's all a we space, not, I'll go hit against the wall, and that's sort of an individual way that I like to go out. But then I'm in a we space with a wall. I just pretend there's this imaginary player behind the wall, and he's hitting every single ball back to me. He never misses. He's the best teacher ever. He never says a word to you. He just keeps hitting the ball back and going, yep, that's how you do it.
Yeah.
So,
oh, yeah.
It's
well, I was just going to say, and that is indeed what we're doing here in the integral community, is trying to chart out this territory.
And you're right square in the middle of it. And you get to see it from all these different directions. And I'm seeing it in the athletic world now, and it's actually happening. That's what's so gratifying. There are people out there that are going, yes, we do some of this stuff. And we want to get together in these conferences and learn more about what you're doing. I want to share notes with people.
Yeah.
Show me what you're doing, man. This is cool stuff.
Yeah.
And it's cool stuff for not only the physical reality of, I'm a college coach, and my job is all about, I keep my job because my team keeps winning. But here his team is playing better, and they're going through this transformative practice every day, and they're becoming bigger, wider, more expansive human beings. And it's like he's keeping his job.
Yeah.
So all of the fundamental stuff that you need to get by in this world is happening. That's one of the biggest problems with the integral community, is how do you make money at this stuff? I mean, it's so leading edge that there's got to be ways where the people who are finding out how to make a living doing this are getting together and showing other people their practices. And these are very, very, what's the word I'm thinking about? Secular practices. There's nothing.
Right.
There's nothing religious involved. You don't even have to use the term spiritual. They are getting a smack face on spiritual experience when they do
Well,
that.
and the value is it's either there or it isn't. It's obvious. I mean, in athletics, it's painfully obvious because, again, it's the timers and distances and all of that good stuff. But it's also obvious in terms of, are the people who are engaging it feeling like they're bigger and better and more good, true, and beautiful? Is there a developmental updraft to this?
Yes, it is happening.
Yeah.
And I'm glad you brought that up, because when I first started, it was I was kind of the black sheep of the national tennis teaching community. I would go and show all of at these big national conferences. I'd show people how to do this. And like a third of the coaches that were watching me go, that's pretty cool. And then another third of them were kind of on the fence. And the other third were like I used to be. It was like, you're full of shit. And so it's not quite like that anymore. But funnily, the elite coaches used to be the ones that were the third that said you're full of shit. Now they're the third that are kind of going, well, I'm kind of on the fence, but show me some stuff. And if you can do a show and tell with them, which is what I always do, I go, come out on the court with me, coach, player, whatever. Let me show you how to get into the zone. You do what I show you how to do, and I promise you within 2 or 3 minutes, you're going to be in the zone. And they go, nah. So I go out and I show them, they get in the zone, and then they go, oh, okay, yes, I've been here before. Then it's like, then you do the tell. So you do the show first. It's very experiential. And that's how I approach all of these coaches and coaching conferences that I go to. And we get them out there and have them do it. And then they're like, there's a magnet here. It sort of draws them in. And they go, I want more.
Mm-hmm.
I've actually had students go, I want more of this. It's like they don't know what this is, but they want more of it.
Yeah.
Well, this is you and ultimate non-dual reality together.
Yeah. Well, and it just gives us an idea of how the world moves forward. I mean, how development in the larger sense happens. I mean, sports is a different thing here in this territory than it was before. I mean, I might argue that in some ways it brings back maybe an indigenous sensibility, the sort of, oneness that early people might have had when they were running and throwing and hunting, all of that good stuff before all these other layers of development have been laid on top of that. But that's what Integral is we want to bring that forward. And there's a sort of a felt intelligence and like an antenna to the larger intelligence that is, we're still sorting it out. But
something else at work here. It's not just us. It's us relative to this something else that's at work. But we're getting in the right state of being to be able to communicate with this something else. Call it pure consciousness, call it God, call it whatever you want to call it. Any kind of prayer state you go into, any kind of meditative state that you go into is eventually going to become a state of presence. And how long you can maintain that state of presence is kind of when you're chit-chatting with whoever else is up here, and that's how you make these connections. And I would spend 8 to 10 hours a day practicing this day in and day out and day in and day out when I first started. And I still do it every single day. And it's become more of it is a spiritual practice now. And that is how I become one with God, one with spirit.
Yeah. Wow.
Not the Lutheran Missouri Synod God we're talking about here.
We've come a ways since then.
Yeah. How I'm connecting is not like how I was told to connect or I was going to go to hell.
Right.
I'm experiencing heaven on earth on a daily basis. Yeah. And I'm trying to show others how to do the same without having to do any kind of preaching or sermons or anything. The game does the talking.
Yeah.
I
love that part. I really do. And I see we're getting on the end of the road here, but for those people who are interested in pursuing this, well, first of all, Scott Ford, book, Integral Consciousness and Sport, Unifying Body, Mind, and Spirit Through Flow. And that's available.
It is Amazon, just hit Amazon. And you can go to my website, which is scottaford.com. And
there's some videos on there. And
and you can get to the book, and there's some articles and journal stuff. And I write about this stuff every day.
Yeah. And then also your conference coming up. And I assume people are welcome to come to that just if they want to know more about this.
Of course. And that's going to be in the Dominican University of California in San Rafael. It's in Marin County, across the bridge from San Francisco. Beautiful little campus. Everything is sort of done right on the campus. Goes for a weekend, July 13th through 15th this year. And you can actually go to the sportsenergygroup.com is the URL. And you can get tickets there. You can find out more about it. And it's really grown. It was a bunch of us. There were like 6 or 7 of us that first started off just going with this conference and we do all the talking, and all of a sudden there's these other people who were coming in who have all of these wonderful integral approaches. So we invited them the next year, and they came and they were the guest speakers, and we were speakers too. And now it's grown where we've got even more people coming, and we're bringing in new teachers, new integral theories towards athletics, health, wellness, exercise. It's really becoming a thing now that is growing exponentially, as opposed to me showing one person how to get in the zone and doing this linear kind of approach to growing things. It's now we've come together as a group and we are expanding now exponentially. So
you're a mogul, man.
What?
You're a mogul.
I don't know about that.
Well, you're creating
I'm just
really powerful, and I'm really impressed and very grateful, and grateful to have you on the Daily Evolver, Scott.
This has really been fun. I can't believe one of the things about when you get into a flow state in a conversation, it's like all of a sudden it's time to go, and you go, wait a minute.
I know.
I'm not sure what happened. Thank you so much.
I great privilege. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Again, thank you, Scott Ford, and check him out, and come back next time for the next Daily Evolver.